Welcome to my philosophy channel. This video is long, but if you stay until the end, you may finally understand what it truly means to seek truth. When we look back through the fog of ancient history, we often see legends instead of real human beings. But beneath the marble statues and the dust of centuries lies a profound story of human courage and existential awakening. Chapter 1. A child who began to question reality. Summary. The seeds of doubt are often planted in the quietest corners of an ordinary life. The name Socrates translates to a healthy power, a meaning chosen by anxious parents hoping to protect their young child. He was born 470 years before Christ, while Athens was ruled magnificently by Pericles. Alternatively, some historical records state he appeared exactly 469 years before Christ. His family lived in a quiet and remote alley where the blistering sun constantly baked the stone pavement every single afternoon. Dust always floated in the stagnant air, while the rhythmic clanging of working blacksmiths echoed loudly through the narrow streets. They survived in deep poverty, relying solely on the meager income generated by his father working with his hands. His father was Socrates, a skilled sculptor whose hands grew exceptionally rough and whose knuckles became stiff from holding heavy chisels. He proudly told everyone that their ancient bloodline originated directly from Daedalus, the legendary craftsman who designed the mythical labyrinth. He patiently carved religious statues and intricate decorations upon his simple wooden table day after day. His mother, Venerate, was a dedicated midwife, possessing extremely gentle eyes and decisive, confident gestures that brought great comfort to others. Whenever desperate neighbors required urgent assistance, she would immediately rise up and walk into those mysterious and chaotic places of birth. Young Socrates frequently helped her carry heavy basins of water, deeply admiring the glistening sweat dripping down her exhausted forehead. In that grueling era, even young children could not afford to live an idle or carefree existence due to widespread hardship. He watched his mother return late in the dark night and secretly vowed to provide her with a much easier future. But while his hands performed ordinary manual labor, his restless mind began to secretly investigate the hidden mysteries of human existence. Why do human beings cry bitter tears when they experience deep pain or profound loss inside their fragile hearts? What is the true definition of universal justice that the confident adults passing through the bustling streets constantly speak about? He studied geometry, practiced music, and even developed very impressive sculpting skills under Yahweh, yet his soul remained unsatisfied. Chapter 2. The Birth of Doubt. Summary. True wisdom begins when we realize that our most cherished beliefs might be entirely wrong. Most human beings desperately seek absolute certainty because the terrifying reality of the unknown threatens their carefully constructed psychological identity. We inherit our deepest beliefs from our parents and society without ever pausing to question their fundamental validity. We become slaves to a collective illusion because being wrong in a large group feels considerably safer than being right entirely alone. Young Socrates refused to accept the comfortable answers provided by the traditional authorities of his ancient Greek environment. He recognized that people do not reject the truth because it is factually incorrect, but because it violently threatens their precious egos. The human mind instinctively builds high defensive walls to protect itself from the painful agony of discovering its own profound ignorance. He did not become a philosopher by locking himself inside a quiet academic ivory tower surrounded by dusty books. Instead, he walked directly into the chaotic marketplace of Athens to confront the arrogance of the city's most powerful and wealthy citizens. He realized that true knowledge does not come from blindly memorizing facts, but from endlessly interrogating the very foundation of reality. Modern society operates in exactly the same flawed manner as that ancient city trembling with blind confidence and intellectual pride. We are educated in systems that aggressively reward mindless memorization while severely punishing the independent thinker who dares to ask difficult questions. We surround ourselves with digital echo chambers that endlessly repeat our own opinions back to us, falsely strengthening our dangerous ignorance. To break free from this comfortable mental prison requires a terrifying amount of exceptional courage and deep intellectual humility. You must willingly step into the dark and freezing void of not knowing anything with absolute certainty. True wisdom can only enter a human soul when the heavy armor of intellectual arrogance is completely shattered and discarded forever. Chapter 3. Walking among the crowd. Summary. To think deeply is to walk alone even while surrounded by 1,000 comforting voices. The crowded streets of Athens served as the ultimate testing ground for his revolutionary approach to human understanding. The city was filled with highly paid sophists who arrogantly claimed they could teach absolute truth to anyone willing to pay their extravagant fees. These deceptive teachers used beautiful rhetoric to conceal the devastating fact that their eloquent words lacked any meaningful philosophical substance. Socrates completely rejected this shallow professionalization of knowledge and refused to accept even a single coin for his transformative conversations. He approached powerful politicians, respected poets, and highly skilled craftsmen who radiated an intimidating aura of supreme self-confidence. He politely asked them to define universal concepts like courage, piety, and beauty, pretending to seek their highly valued expert guidance. Through a carefully structured series of relentless questions, he methodically dismantled their weak arguments until their ignorance was publicly exposed. The proud experts would inevitably contradict themselves, realizing with bitter humiliation that they understood absolutely nothing about the subjects they championed. This painful exposure sparked a furious psychological resistance because unmasking a fool always creates a vicious and extremely unforgiving enemy. We witness this exact same destructive psychological dynamic dominating our modern social media platforms every single day. Millions of confident individuals broadcast aggressive opinions about immensely complex geopolitical issues without possessing even the most basic foundational understanding. When someone challenges their shallow narratives with difficult facts, they do not seek wisdom. They immediately seek vicious retaliation against the questioner. The crowd always despises the solitary individual who dares to point out the frightening hollowness of their shared collective beliefs. It takes immense courage to walk through a mob of angry people and calmly suggest that their anger is entirely unjustified. To live a philosophical life means you must stop seeking validation from a society that is profoundly sick with unconscious delusion. Chapter 4. The Method of Questioning. Summary. True dialogue is not a battle to be won, but a shared journey toward the brilliant light. His unique approach to uncovering truth became known throughout history as the Socratic method of relentless interrogation. He did not lecture the ignorant masses or forcefully inject predetermined facts into their stubborn and highly resistant minds. Instead, he acted exactly like his mother, functioning as a spiritual midwife, assisting others in giving birth to their own original ideas. He famously declared that the only thing he truly knew was the absolute fact of his own profound ignorance. This statement was not an expression of false modesty, but a powerful philosophical weapon designed to disarm defensive egos. By admitting ignorance, he created a neutral psychological space where genuine inquiry could flourish without the toxic interference of human pride. Think of the classroom metaphor, where a teacher presents a beautiful red apple and asks the students to describe it. The students confidently describe the ripe fruit based solely, on their limited visual perception of its shining exterior. But Socrates would force them to cut it open, revealing the hidden rot inside, proving that initial perception rarely equals fundamental reality. Our desperate need for cognitive control makes us cling furiously to the simplest and most superficial explanations of complex events. We find great comfort in comfortable illusions because they protect us from the exhausting and continuous labor of deep critical thought. True philosophical dialogue destroys this comfort by demanding that we strip away every layer of assumption until only raw truth remains. This painful interrogation process is absolutely necessary because the unexamined life is ultimately not worth living for any human being. You must become the relentless interrogator of your own mind, constantly questioning your deepest motives and most cherished political allegiances. When you finally pierce through the thick veil of your own ignorance, you experience a terrifying but beautiful intellectual rebirth. Chapter 5. The Conflict with Society. Summary. A society built on illusions will always punish the individual who dares to point out the uncomfortable truth. As his powerful intellectual influence expanded across the city, he inevitably attracted both devoted followers and extremely dangerous political enemies. The aristocratic elite grew deeply disturbed by this modest man who effortlessly exposed their arrogance in front of laughing young crowds. They realized that a population taught to question absolute authority poses an existential threat to the established structures of unjust power. Society demands conformity and predictability because these elements provide the essential foundation for social stability and economic control. When a powerful thinker begins to dismantle the myths that keep the masses obedient, the system instinctively reacts with violent hostility. The truth teller instantly becomes a virus that the social immune system must aggressively eradicate to preserve its own comfortable delusion. We frequently observe this terrifying phenomenon in the vicious cancel culture that dominates our contemporary digital ecosystem. An individual who expresses a carefully reasoned, nuanced opinion is often mercilessly crushed by an emotionally unstable and furious online mob. The crowd does not punish the thinker for being factually incorrect. They punish them for disturbing the sacred consensus of the herd. The tragedy of human existence is that we deeply resent the very individuals who desperately attempt to awaken us from slumber. We prefer to remain blindly chained inside the dark cave, staring at comforting shadows dancing upon the cold stone wall. When someone finally drags us toward the blinding light of the sun, we hate them for making our fragile eyes burn. To embrace the truth means you must accept the brutal fact that you will likely be completely misunderstood by your peers. You cannot simultaneously possess the deepest truths of the universe and maintain unbroken popularity among the superficial and ignorant masses. Wisdom inherently isolates the individual, creating a heavy burden that only the strongest and most resilient souls can endure without breaking. Chapter 6. The Nature of Ignorance. Summary. The greatest danger to the human soul is not a lack of knowledge, but the false illusion of absolute certainty. Ignorance is not simply a harmless void waiting patiently to be filled with accurate information and enlightened wisdom. It is an active, aggressive, and highly defensive psychological force that willingly fights to protect its own dark territory. When a person truly believes they already possess all the answers, their mind shuts down and becomes impervious to new evidence. This is why the most dangerous individuals in any society are never the uneducated masses searching for guidance. The greatest threat always comes from the proud intellectuals and arrogant politicians who possess absolute unshakable certainty in their own righteousness. Their blind confidence causes them to commit atrocious crimes while genuinely believing they are performing virtuous and necessary acts of justice. Socrates discovered that authentic virtue is entirely inseparable from genuine knowledge, meaning that evil is merely a tragic symptom of deep ignorance. No rational human being willingly chooses to harm their own immortal soul if they truly understand the devastating universal consequences. We commit cruel acts only because our corrupted perception falsely convinces us that those actions will somehow benefit our selfish interests. We live in a world where people appear overwhelmingly confident online despite severely lacking even a shred of deep understanding. We are terrified of admitting our ignorance because modern society brutally equates uncertainty with incompetence and professional weakness. Therefore, we aggressively defend our uninformed opinions, building impenetrable mental fortresses that keep the illuminating light of genuine truth completely locked out. To overcome this destructive tendency, we must continuously remind ourselves that true intellectual growth only occurs in a state of vulnerability. You must cultivate the exceptional bravery required to look at your deepest convictions and calmly whisper that you might be wrong. Only when you completely empty your cup can you finally begin to taste the pure and refreshing water of authentic wisdom. Chapter 7. The Trial. Summary. When the truth becomes a threat to power, the crowd will always demand the immediate execution of the truth-teller. His relentless pursuit of truth eventually collided head-on with the fragile and terrified political establishment of Athens. The Spartan Empire had just ended its brutal rule over the city, leaving the restored Athenian democracy deeply shaken and extremely paranoid. The desperate politicians needed a convenient scapegoat to distract the angry population from the devastating failures of their own corrupt leadership. He was hauled before a massive jury of 500 citizens and accused of serious crimes by the so-called Democrats. They officially charged him with severely disrespecting the traditional gods of the state and deliberately corrupting the vulnerable minds of the youth. These vague and malicious accusations were nothing more than transparent excuses designed to silence the most dangerous questioning voice in the city. Standing before the angry multitude, he refused to beg for mercy or offer pathetic apologies to save his own mortal life. He calmly explained that he was actually a divine gift bestowed upon the lazy city to awaken it from spiritual slumber. He compared himself to a pesky gadfly stinging a sluggish and powerful horse, forcing it to move and acknowledge its grand responsibilities. The furious jury demanded that he renounce his philosophical mission and quietly disappear into the obscure shadows of exile. But he proudly declared that remaining silent was absolutely impossible because a life devoid of intense philosophical examination was utterly worthless. He deliberately chose to antagonize the proud judges because he knew that compromising his deepest principles would destroy his eternal soul. His condemnation was a historic injustice that perfectly illustrates the eternal and bitter war between the enlightened individual and the blind mob. A society will always forgive a murderer far more easily than it will forgive a prophet who shatters their comforting foundational myths. The jury voted for death not because he was guilty of any crime, but because his brilliant light exposed their repulsive darkness. Chapter 8. The Choice Between Life and Truth. Summary. A physical life purchased by sacrificing your highest principles is simply a different form of profound spiritual death. Following the harsh verdict, he was locked inside a cold and barren prison cell to await his scheduled execution. His wealthy and devoted student, Crito, visited him, offering a carefully planned opportunity to escape the impending death sentence. Crito desperately urged him to flee the city, delay the inevitable execution, and enjoy a few more years of comfort and beautiful meals. Any ordinary man would have immediately seized this generous offer and ran fearfully toward the safe borders of a neighboring territory. But Socrates gently rebuked his weeping friend, explaining that fleeing would utterly betray everything he had preached during his entire life. If he escaped the legally mandated punishment, he would irreversibly validate the unjust system and destroy the absolute integrity of his philosophy. He simply shook his head slowly and calmly stated that he must resolutely complete the difficult path he had willingly chosen. He ordered Crito to quickly fetch the deadly poison, demonstrating a magnificent defiance against the terrifying illusion of human mortality. He understood that clinging desperately to biological survival while sacrificing moral purity was the ultimate act of unforgivable philosophical cowardice. This profound choice forces every modern human being to ask themselves what they actually value more than their own physical comfort. We frequently compromise our ethics in the workplace or remain silent during injustices simply to protect our fragile careers and social standing. We commit tiny spiritual suicides every single day by prioritizing our immediate material safety over the demanding requirements of absolute truth. To live a truly meaningful existence, you must identify the foundational core values that you would willingly suffer for without any hesitation. When you firmly anchor your identity in the unshakable bedrock of moral truth, the fear of physical destruction completely evaporates. You become an invincible force of nature because the terrified word world holds absolutely no leverage over a mind prepared to gladly die. Chapter 9. Death and Immortality of Thought. Summary. The fragile physical body may perish, but a brilliant mind devoted to pure truth becomes entirely immortal. As the final moments approached, the prison guard walked into the room carrying the deadly cup of crushed hemlock. This guard was a simple and kind man who expressed deep sorrow, openly crying because Socrates was the noblest prisoner he had ever met. The guard handed over the poison and explained that the condemned man must drink it and walk around until his legs grew heavy. He drank the fatal concoction from the modest cup without demonstrating even a single trace of hesitation or lingering fear. He lay down quietly as the frigid numbness slowly crept upward from his feet, methodically paralyzing his mortal physical vessel. His loyal students wept bitterly, unable to control their exploding emotional anguish as they witnessed the imminent departure of their beloved teacher. Suddenly, he pulled the cloth away from his face and spoke his final, deeply mysterious words directly to his friend Crito. He whispered weakly that he owed a sacred rooster to Asclepius, the mythological god of healing, and urged Crito to pay the debt. He viewed death not as a tragedy, but as the ultimate cure for the brutal and exhausting sickness known as mortal life. A brief moment later, his weak body twitched softly, and the greatest mind in ancient Greece finally became entirely still. His eyes remained open, staring forward, but the magnificent spark of divine intellectual light had forever departed from that small prison cell. This majestic final scene was beautifully and meticulously recorded for all eternity by his brilliant student Plato inside the philosophical dialogue Phaedo. He did not die because he was a criminal. He died magnificently as a righteous martyr executed for loving the truth too much. His courageous execution transformed him from a local Athenian eccentric into an eternal symbol of humanity's desperate and tragic search for ultimate meaning. They successfully poisoned the man, but they completely failed to eradicate the brilliant flame of critical thought he ignited in the darkness. Please remember to like this video and subscribe to my philosophy channel if you wish to continue uncovering the deepest mysteries of existence. As you return to your daily life and walk among the bustling crowd, remember that the illusion of certainty is a dangerous trap. We must continuously strive to awaken our dormant minds by relentlessly questioning the very reality we have been comfortably conditioned to blindly accept. If knowing the truth means standing alone, then the question is, not whether truth is worth it, but whether you are willing to pay its price.